let's get into it. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to webinar number 3 in our Orchestra Sales Masterclass series. Today, we're going to be talking about communicating value to C&I customers. My name's Georgie, and I'm Head of Customer Success here at Orkestra. And with me is James Allston, Orkestra co-CEO and co-founder. James is going to be running our session today. I'm here to do introductions, help answer your questions, and I'm also here to keep James honest. Make sure we pitch this at a really good level. So I'll just be asking some simple questions here and there around different aspects of this. So what is the Masterclass series about, and why are we doing this? Back a slide, James. So we want to empower you with a winning sales method and tools to ramp up the way and the time frame in which you sell solar and battery projects. So this is a 4-part series. In session 1, Chris and James discussed understanding your customer needs. And session 2, Tyler and James covered matching energy solutions to customer needs. Today is all about communicating value to your customers. And then session 4 is a little bonus on how to pump up the value of your projects. For any of you who missed the first or second webinars, they were really great sessions with a lot of valuable content. These were recorded, and I highly recommend watching them. For everyone who registered for the masterclass, you should have received an email with the links to the recordings. But if you've lost it, just get in touch and we can send this out again. All right, next slide.
Oh,
not that
sorry.
one.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so on the screen now, you'll see our objective and agenda for today's session. The point of today's webinar is that by the end of this, you can present commercial new energy solutions as sound investments, speak the customer's language and build trust, and then quickly iterate or extend your project solutions to deal with objections. James will kick things off with a quick review of the last session, and that'll go for about the first 5 minutes. Then he'll take us through presenting solutions to financial decision makers and detailed objection handling. We'll finish up with a quick closeout and explainer of the homework, and then should hopefully have around 10 minutes of question time at the end, but we will stay on and extend the session if needed to make sure we do get to all your questions. So please send these through. At the bottom of the Zoom window, you'll see an option like a button for Q&A. Feel free to chuck your questions in there anytime throughout the webinar, and we'll make sure we go through all of these at the end. Last little note from me, the webinar today is being recorded, and we'll send a link to the recording and a copy of the slide deck to everyone who's registered, and that will go out either this afternoon or tomorrow. All right. So over to you now, James.
Thanks, Georgie. Yeah, let's get into it. So I just want to just to recap from the first few webinars that we had. And what we did was we went through in the first webinar talking about the feasibility first method and how that can be used to really have a much more impactful, faster, and more rewarding approach particularly with commercial industrial customers. And the difference between the traditional method, which is very much around, it's really sort of codified with many residential solar software that you can use, and the feasibility first method with Orkestra, which is about trying to bring the feasibility analysis part to the very, very start of the project and doing that first. And that enables you to then start talking about value from the get-go with a customer. We also talked about discovery and what we need to do in the discovery process, starting off with who is the customer, understanding their role, are they the right person to be talking to? Why do we, really trying to understand why as a customer considering solar and batteries, what are their drivers? What are they trying to achieve by doing this project, and getting to that next level of detail down of okay, is it about bills? Is it about unpredictable costs? Is it about carbon and sustainability? Is it about potentially about blackouts? Trying to get to that next level down, and then using that to be able to design different solutions and solving the challenges of the customer with by considering, what is the best solution to meet those to meet that challenge that the customer's facing. So really what we're doing is we again talked about in the second webinar, the what, and understanding like how do we get to the what? And we talked about this double design method where when you start, it's about exploring the problem and then deciding what to fix. And then the design process is testing lots of different solutions and then settling on like what is the optimal solution for a customer. So if we think about that in the context of the type of conversation you're going to have with a customer, it's like, okay, I want 100 kilowatts of solar. And then the next question is then, why are you considering solar and batteries? And then deciding on it, from that conversation, expanding out and understanding a bit more about the customer's drivers, what they're trying to achieve. Customer then will allow it through that conversation to then zero in on like what is the problem or problems that they're facing, and then you can converge on like what you're going to fix, and then we're going to test a whole bunch of different potential solutions to fix that problem, and then finally zero in on what is the optimal solution for that customer's challenge. So ideally through that process you're getting to a winning sales proposal. What we're going to talk about today is like how to do this sort of final part, which is talking to a customer and like what's the process of like that you need to be going through to kind of get to that winning sales proposal in sort of practical terms. So what do we need to do? So if we sort of take that diamond process and we sort of talk about the sort of practical process here, we're going to go through that discovery, then we're going to start exploring solutions. In Orkestra, what we allow you to do is submit feasibility analyses before you're submitting the sales proposal. And then you can get feedback on those from the customer. And this allows you to go through a repetitious process with a customer where you're, exploring solutions, presenting feasibility, getting the customer's feedback on different project options, then being able to do additional exploration, submit new analysis. And this process in Orkestra is fast, right? So in theory, like you can actually go from discovery process to exploring solutions in like within an hour, submit analyses to a customer in an email, get their feedback, and then do this process for maybe another hour or so of going round and round. You might even get to the stage where you can actually do this live and get really comfortable to be able to do it live. And then at the end, you're going to be able to submit a sales proposal, which is actually matches up with already with what does the customer want, right? Because we've actually identified what the customer wants even before we get to that sales proposal. We're not using the sales proposal as the key thing to sell this project. We're using this as the cherry on top. And when we're talking about larger projects, what we recommend is rather than trying to get the customer to commit to the project there and then, maybe give them a smaller target. So get them to perhaps commit to paying for the technical design, and if the project proceeds, offer to roll those costs into the project, and so that they can capitalize those costs. And then this puts the customer on the hook, and we're able to then get into dispatch some engineers, start doing the technical design work in detail, and then produce like a final proposal for them at the end of that process. So in Orkestra, it's around getting the customer's needs, getting their bills, getting their load data. Even the load data is kind of optional, and sometimes you'll be able to just use data from within our library to kind of start this process off. Doing the analysis in the tool, generating feasibility and branding that with your own branding, and then getting customer feedback. And so I've got a little example email here of like what we might even send to a customer. It doesn't need to be a proposal. What we're trying to do is elicit feedback from a customer and trying to get their response of like, okay, is this in the ballpark? Or are we just completely out of the ballpark? And then finally, after we've gone through that process a little bit, we can then submit the final proposal. And you can do that through Orkestra as well. You can actually set up a proposal within the tool and then use that as the kind of final outcome. So this is how not to do it. So here's an example from a residential solar software which has been used. And, admittedly, this is a relatively small solar system, so selling to a SME customer. So there is a bit of overlap, but we do see companies trying to persist with using residential solar software right up into very large system sizes. And the problem with it is it's not structured in a way that you can speak to value. It's structured in a way that you can sell to a commercial, like sell to a residential customer. So the challenges with it is it's presenting only one solution. It encourages you to talk about yourself rather than the customer. So lots of blah blah about you, which I reckon if you read this little blurb here, this could explain just about any solar installer. Then presenting the aesthetics. What does it look like on the roof when, actually that has very, very little, unless the customer is trying to actively find something that they can show the world of how well they're doing. Sometimes you see, people, doing laying out the panels to write a word or something like that. The aesthetics are really not going to really be a massive driver in this. Then the next step is to talk about the technical solution, which leads to lots of stuff about what panels they are and what inverters they are, which is just going to be blah blah again to someone who's buying a commercial solution. Unfortunately, this is all things that as solar people in the industry we really care about, but actually when it comes down to it, if you're talking to a CFO, they've got no idea what a Trina solar panel is versus a Suntech solution or whatever it is. That is just words on a page. So unfortunately, as much as we want to talk about that technical solution, we want to try and move past that and start talking about the financials. In this example, the financials that were presented were just completely unbelievable. So whatever inputs went into this to generate these this particular proposal, on page 5, we've got stuff that's just well, that's just rubbish. I don't believe those results. So we really want to avoid residential solar systems for selling to C&I because they're just not structured in a way that is going to generate an outcome for you guys. So what do we want to do? So what does it look like to do it in the right way? So, well, first off, we're going to keep coming back to the why, right? So we're going to say, talk to the customer's drivers. What do they tell you? Write that down. Make it clear that you listened to the customer, you heard what their problems were. So you might just put some few dot points on okay, I heard that you're trying to get to net zero and you really want to improve the carbon footprint of your building by reducing your electricity consumption, and also aiming to reduce bills at the same time, as an opening paragraph, right, of this is why we're here, this is why we're having this conversation. Then talk about the range of potential solutions that were considered, and then finally talk to the specific recommendations that you have around what is the optimal solution to actually match the drivers that the customer has. And that really needs to be the way that you lead to a customer, because this shows the customer that you've understood their problem and you're finding solutions to match it. And this process is going to build trust. The other way that you can build trust is show the context of why you chose a particular solution. So within the tool, what we can do is model lots of different potential solutions, identify the one that we think we recommend, saving it, and it has a little star on the top, and then show what happens when you increase or decrease the size of a solar system or a battery system, and the effect it will have on, say, the net present value or the IRR to the project. And this context will be really empowering for you to demonstrate that you've thought deeply around what is the best solution for a customer. And if a customer comes back to you and says, you know what, we don't really have the budget for a 600 kilowatt system, you can then show other potential options really, really quickly. And we'll talk about that in the kind of dealing with customer objections part, how do we then show other potential solutions that a customer's going to be that's going to resonate with a customer. The other thing that I would really encourage is to like move away from speaking to technical jargon. So here's some like common things that we see in proposals is like, we propose 228 by 450 watt Trino monocrystalline panels and 2 by 50 kilowatt SMA inverters. I guarantee you that most people will not know what that means. And so what we need to do is like elevate the conversation, bring it back to the financial value that we're delivering from this system, and talk in much more high level terms. So we determined that the optimal solution is a 100 kilowatt solar system. This will reduce your costs by X, meeting your budget constraint of Y. So it's very much like bringing it up a level, talking at a much higher level around what is the technical solution, and trying to bring it back to the value that you're bringing to a customer. Another one might be the system will produce, 152,302 kilowatts per annum. I mean, this is just a meaningless statement to most customers. They have no idea what a kilowatt hour is in general terms. Like, I would challenge most customers to even know like how much energy they consume at the site, let alone trying to then orientate themselves around how much a system will generate. So a better way of framing this would be, we propose that the system will supply 52% of your electricity needs and reduce your costs by, $10,900 per annum. So again, like, let's bring it back to the like, what is the value that we're going to bring to the customer? Here's another one great from emissions, and you see this a lot. The solar system will reduce carbon emissions by 7,524 trees per annum. Again, meaningless statement. No one has any idea what that means. And so we need to kind of bring this back to what is the actual value that we're bringing for a customer. So another way to present this would be, we propose a solution which will reduce your scope 2 emissions by 42%. This is equivalent to paying $10,000 a year in purchasing carbon credits. So bringing it back to like, what is the tangible value for a customer here? Another one, get a VPP ready 250 kilowatt hour battery for only $255,000 extra. There's no reference point for here. So we need to kind of bring this reference back to, okay, well, if the battery was to participate in a VPP, what would be the change in value for a customer? Another one might be, and this is again talking to the financials, but not presenting in a way that a customer can actually grapple with, is someone, and this is, we saw this on a proposal, you can get a 7-year lease option where the payments are only $514 per month. Okay, but is that generating positive cash flow or not? And so what we want to talk about is the positive cash flow. So using the 7-year lease, the upfront costs can be amortized and paid for by the bill savings. You'll save an estimated $1,230 per annum, increasing to $7,398 per annum after the 7 years. So we can talk to the like, hey, this is going to cash flow. We're going to cash flow the, we're going to pay for the system out of the cash flows of the project using this mechanism. So when you're speaking to the financials, there's a bunch of different metrics that you'll come across, right? And we actually have 4 of these in our tool. There's another one, ROI, and I'll just talk to that a little bit around pros and cons of that in a second. But these are common metrics that you'll see in residential solar proposals in our system. And what we want to try and encourage people to really get to is moving away from talking about bill savings and payback periods, which are kind of okay for short-term analysis of like where you've got a very fast payback, to moving towards talking to net present value and IRR, which are perhaps less understood, but actually can be much more impactful for speaking to particularly someone who's really financially literate. So if you're speaking to a CFO or a CEO, speaking to the NPV and IRR is something that they're likely to be able to understand. And so it's really important as an industry that we get really comfortable with talking to these metrics and understanding what they mean, not just throwing the numbers out there, but actually understanding what they're doing. So part of this session today is I'm going to talk a little bit around how to think about these metrics and why they're really useful for but particularly when you're trying to sell solar and battery solutions to customers, how you can use them for really impactful conversations with customers. So to sort of talk about like why cash flow and simple payback period are not good metrics for particularly long-term investments, here's a really simple example of where, you know, I go to Georgie and ask her for some cash. So, hey, Georgie, can I have some cash? And Georgie will be like, yeah, sure. How much do you need? I'm like, 10 grand, but here's the trick. I need to pay you back over 4 years. Can I pay you 2.5 grand over 4 years? Georgie's natural response is going to be like, oh, that's a bit hard. I've got to like draw down on my home loan offset to do this. So right now, what she's talking about there is the opportunity cost of her lending me 10 grand. So sure, I've paid her back. Like in absolute terms, I'm going to give her $10,000 back. But for Georgie, because she's taking money out of a home loan offset, like she's actually having some costs of not being able to put that $10,000 against her mortgage over the next 4 years. She's now like expressing to us, hey, there's actually an opportunity cost for me to give you this cash. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, well, I don't want to leave you out of pocket. And so George's natural response will be, well, if you can cover my borrowing costs, then I can probably make it work. So here's where, when we're talking about cash flow and simple payback period, which are naturally things that customers are going to want to talk about because they're kind of really simple and easily understood, when we're talking about a long-term investment, they fall down because they're not speaking to the kind of opportunity cost for a customer. So if we can move from talking from these metrics to talking about IRR, we can actually start to have a much richer conversation with the customer. And I'll give you some examples of like how we can actually do that in a sec. So most people would understand cash flow payback and ROI, but just a quick recap. So here's an example of like different of how to think about it. So in this example, we've got a $100,000 investment, and then we're going to get $20,000 a year out of that coming from bill savings. And so the cash flow is the sum of the revenue and the expenses, where the expenses are negative. And so you know, this cash flow line shows neatly what that's going to look like. And so when you're talking to, say, a customer, we got to say, okay, we're going to invest $100,000 in a solar system, and it's going to have bill savings of $20,000 a year. To get to the payback period, all we do is need to calculate the cumulative cash flow, find when it goes to zero, and then that time that it takes to get to that zero is the payback period. The ROI, which is sometimes quoted, is an expression of yield. So how much profit is generated in any given year, and what we're doing is divide that profit number divided by the initial investment, and then that gets us the return on investment. So it's kind of helpful if you're wanting to understand the profitability of an investment, but actually not particularly helpful if you're trying to compare apples with apples. So let's talk about NPV and IRR next. So NPV, the way that we're going to calculate it is this way here. So we're going to start off with the cumulative undiscounted cash flows, and then we're going to calculate the cumulative discounted cash flows.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
What is the difference between discounted and undiscounted? Like, why does a discount exist?
Yeah. So good way of thinking about this is like the buying power of cash, right? So if you have a dollar coin today and you go to the supermarket, you can probably go and buy one Mars bar on special with that dollar coin, right? But if you went back 7 to 10 years and you went into the supermarket with that $1 coin, you still got a $1 coin. It's the same one. In fact, you could probably even find a dollar coin from 10 years ago. And you go to the supermarket with that, you could probably could have bought 2 Mars bars on special. But if we now like roll forward 7 to 10 years, and you go to the supermarket. When you go to the supermarket, that $1 coin might only be able to buy you half a Mars bar. So now you actually need a $2 coin, not a $1 coin. You've still got the same coin, right? The coin from 10 years ago is the same coin that you might have in 10 years' time. It's just the value of that coin has changed over time. And so what we can do here is use the power of discounting to understand what is the value of an investment where we're considering that investment in today's value of $1 coins. And so this is so if we just run through this example and come back to the Mars bars. So if we go and take this this cash flow, this undiscounted cash flow, and then we apply the discount. So all we're actually doing here with this creating is we take the discount rate and then we create the periodic rate, which is the classic sort of cumulative interest rate formula. So 1 plus the discount rate to the number of years. So so it would be, so in the first year it's 1 plus 5% to the power of 1. In the second year it's 1 plus 5% to the power of 2. In the third year it's 1 plus 5% to the power of 3. And then to get the discounted cash flow, we take the undiscounted cash flow and divide it by this periodic rate. And then that gives us the discounted cash flow numbers. Then to calculate the net present value, all we're doing is over the period of this investment, so in this case it's a 10-year investment, we just sum up the discounted cash flows, and then that gets us to this number here. So bring that back to Mars bars. So customer might come in and invest their $100,000, and then from the undiscounted cash flows, they might go, oh, great, out of this, I'm going to be able to buy 100,000 Mars bars over the next 10 years with this investment, from the profits of this investment. But actually, because of the time-based value of money, they're not going to be able to buy 100,000 Mars bars. They're only going to be able to buy 54,000 Mars bars. That's where the difference between the discounted and the undiscounted cash flows are really, really important. And when you're speaking to someone who understands the difference between these, so if you're speaking to a CFO or a CEO, coming to these and talking about this is really valuable, because they're going to want to know, am I going to make any money out of this? The other way that you can use the discount rate, and this is the most common, is that rather than putting in the CPI, you're actually putting in the borrowing rate for the customer. So
is that like if they were to go to a bank at the interest rate?
That's right. Yeah. So it could be that, or it could be what's called the weighted cost of capital, which is the combination of a business's debt and equity costs. Most businesses will know what their WACC is, but if they don't and they're not sure, and you're trying to find a reasonable discount rate, you might start with the commercial unsecured loan rate. And you can just go and type in commercial unsecured loan rate Australia, and you'll probably find a half dozen different banks that are publishing rates there. And that would be a reasonable place to start with today's with a discount rate today. Okay, so then IRR, then this is the next metric that we need to talk to. So the IRR is really, really great metric because it allows you to compare different types of investments. The way that it's calculated is actually using the net present value. So what an IRR calculation will do is that it goal seeks what is the discount rate that would have to be used to actually get a 0 net present value at the end of the investment period. So when we think about how that works is, if I had to go and borrow money in this example at 15.1%, I will get no value out of this investment over the investment period. But if my borrowing rate was 8% or 7%, even 10%, I'm actually going to make I'm actually going to make more money than what I'm borrowing at using this. So it's a really useful metric to be using. So if we go back to the sort of like overarching way of thinking about NPV and IRR, NPV is really useful for understanding the total value in absolute dollar terms in today's money. So how many $1 coins am I going to get through this investment? And it's really also fantastic for comparing a wide range of investment sizes and investment horizons as well. So you might have an investment which has a 5-year horizon versus a 10-year horizon. You can use NPV to kind of to compare those different investments. And it's really good because it considers the scale of the investment much better than IRR, but it will bias bigger investments. So it does make the assumption that like you have a bottomless pit of cash and you can continue to pour cash in. So an example of something that you could do to actually compare NPV would be you could go and invest a certain amount of money and the net present value would be $1.5 million today. If someone says, I actually don't do that, here's $1 million, you can compare the value of those two investments and actually go, oh, which one's better for me? And tells you which one you can take. IRR, by comparison, is useful for comparing the relative value of a project. So it's really, really good for comparing apples with apples with different types of investment. So I heard a fantastic example from a customer the other day. I was having a call with them about how to communicate value to their end customer. And this solar company had a customer where there was 2 decision makers for the project. One was really keen to get solar, was really driven on the on the carbon benefits and the sustainability benefits of the solar, wasn't too fussed with the upfront cost to be able to do that. However, the other decision maker was very financially motivated, thinking like a CFO, and their sort of retort back to the solar installer was, oh, look, I'd rather put my money in like a 8.5% property trust. Like, well, how about we go and look at the returns of the project you just presented? And we went and looked at it, and the IRR of the project was 16%. Well, 16% is better than 8.5%, isn't it? Like double, in fact. Like, go back and have a talk to him about what it means to invest in the solar project versus his property trust. And when they understood like that was how they could speak to IRR, it empowered them to actually go and close the project. So this is where, being able to get really fluent in these financial terms and using these terms to compare with other types of investments will enable you to actually have a really rich conversation with the customer. So the other thing that we need to know about the IRR is that it's not particularly helpful in understanding the quantum of investment. So there's an example here at the bottom where, you might only invest $1 up front and get $10 per annum back. And when you do the IRR calculation on that, it's going to be spectacular. But in absolute dollar terms, it's 2/5 of stuff all. And so it's not actually telling you the total value that you're getting out of the project. And so when you're speaking to IRR, you also probably want to have net present value to really get a sense of like, what is the scale of the investment here? What in absolute terms are we talking in terms of the value that we're going to generate for a customer? All right, demo time. So we're going to like quickly swap and have a quick look at the Orkestra software and just talk to like how you might present these results to a customer. So once you've gone through, and I'm going to use the example CNI project because I think most people will have this in their, or should have a copy of this example CNI project in their trial accounts or paid accounts. And in this project, we're actually looking at, this is a site. It's got a CNI tariff. It's in essential energy patch on a 3-rate demand tariff. So half a megawatt demand, maximum demand for the site. And we've tested like 10 different solar sizes between 100 kilowatts and a megawatt, 10 different battery sizes. We're looking at a full value stack that includes virtual power plant revenues, but it's neither here nor there in the way that we present this today. And we've looked at a site adjustment. And so when we come down to the different solutions that we've got here, we're going to start off with this net present value one. And if we just star that as a as a useful reference point, and then we swap to rate of return, which is the internal rate of return, and we're going to star that one as a useful reference point. We're going to start drilling into these projects and actually having a look at them. So when we look at the rank these by solar size, and perhaps turn on baseline versus adjusted. So the adjusted one is there's no ability to export on site. We can actually look at like, here's all the different solutions ranked in terms of net present value. And we can see that the one that's going to generate the most value, so the most $1 coins to buy Mars bars, is a 600 kilowatt solar system with a 200 kilowatt hour battery. But when we think about this in terms of IRR, the rate of return for this is only a little bit under 17%. And so that may not move the dial for a customer. They may want to have a higher rate of return for a customer. So then if we look at that as like, what was the optimal IRR for the project? The optimal one was nearly 30% IRR, and but the net present value was a third of the outcome for the best solution. So for a customer that's thinking about what do they invest in, they're probably going to be thinking, I need to go somewhere between the bookends of this, right? Like, do I really just want to go for the smaller solution here? And maybe it's a very fast payback, but it's not actually generating as much value as if I went for a much bigger system. And so these two different metrics are fantastically useful at understanding the difference between those. We also look at like the cash flow and the payback period. This project here, the larger project, is going to generate $200,000 worth of cash flow and bill savings with a 5.8 year payback, versus this one that's only going to generate $42,000. And so again, just trying to move to the highest rate of return is not necessarily going to generate the most value for a customer. And so helping a customer through understanding the differences here will be really helpful in terms of navigating to the optimal solution for a customer. When we jump to the final results page, it gives you a chance to kind of get into that in more detail. So actually, I wanted to go for the other solution. Let's go for this one. So I've created a version of this results page, which shows the cash flow. So this is kind of, again, good for sort of talking to some common metrics that people will understand, how you get to that cash flow, how the project is made up and what kind of intensity is there. But then, being able to sort of drill down into these results and talking to, say, the bill savings is going to be really helpful. But again, we want to bring this back up to what is the overarching value that we're generating for a project here. So speaking to particularly these two metrics. All right. So that's sort of talking to the financials and communicating the value of the projects. We go back to our presentation here. Talk about detailed objection handling. So I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. Quite neatly, it's lined up with the results of our LinkedIn survey that we had as well, which is good. So this slide is not wrong. So we talked about like the most common objections that a customer is going to come back at us with. Payback or ROI is not good enough. The initial capex is too high. I don't have the budget, and the project risk is too high. So I want to sort of go back to that example and talk to like these three different particular common problems that are going to be out there, and how you can use Orkestra to like navigate a customer from one of these objections back to a solution that's actually going to work for them. But the first two, yeah, sorry, Georgie.
I was just going to say, it'd be really interesting if potentially after this, we look at, instead of going out and focusing on those ROI payback metrics as they've come in at number one, switching things up, is it still the same result if you then be using NPV and IRR?
That's a really good point. And in fact, like many customers will say something like, oh, I want a 4-year payback. And that's pretty hard to achieve for solar. And we'll talk about ways that you can do that, because it's a really long-term investment, right? Like it's an investment which you can actually measure over 30 years in some cases, if you've got like a panel that you're installing with a 30-year warranty. So customers saying, oh, I want a 4-year payback is actually a bit ridiculous. And if you bring that back to an IRR and you show them the IRR, that 4-year payback is going to be something like a 30% IRR. But if you show them the one that's, we go back to the example that I had before. In fact, let's just quickly swap to it. We talk about the difference between these two results. This one here, which is the optimal solution, with a 5.8-year payback, okay, that might not achieve that 4-year outcome that you're hoping to achieve, but I would challenge a customer to get a 17% return in basically any other investment that they might be able to make for their business. That is sure, they might be able to find some that are better, but that is a pretty outstanding outcome. So, and even if that's not an outstanding outcome, we can work back through the results to find a solution that may actually achieve some magic number that they've got in their heads. So here we're working back through the results. We're going back and we're looking at smaller sizes of solar and battery. And here's a solution where we've got like a 300 kilowatt solar system with a 200 kilowatt hour battery, smaller investment up front. We've managed to achieve 80% of the NPV, but we've got to like a 20% rate of return. And so customers will commonly come at you with these kind of hurdle rates that they might be looking for. And we can go back through the results and actually find them a solution that will meet those hurdle rates. So yeah, so the payback period, watch out for it, because it's kind of it's a throwaway metric. It's actually pretty meaningless when you bring it back to other types of investments that are out there. So what is a really good way of being able to deal with these payback period and capex? What's a tried and true method of dealing with it? And the way that you can do with it is by finance. So there's multiple different ways that a customer can achieve much faster payback periods through using financial instruments. And so common ones that you'll find out there are things like debt financing, so getting a loan from the bank, equipment leasing is really common. So something like the Smarties financing is really common, or using an energy service model like a power purchase agreement, PPA. So something like a Green Peak Energy is a good example of a provider that will provide that kind of model. And there's different reasons of why you would use different types of metrics here, and different types of funding here. So when we look at the kind of pros and cons of each of these different options, bank loans will typically be the lowest cost of financing, generally be the cheapest. Customer gets to own the asset. The fixed payments are typically fixed. It's going to reduce the equity requirements. So if someone doesn't have the budget to pay for something, we're able to now reduce the cash requirements up front and through using debt. However, it can be a little bit harder to obtain. However, increasingly having debt funders coming to us, to Orkestra now, and talking to the need to try and get the funding out there. So DLL is an example of a debt funder that you could use for smaller check sizes. You need to pay something up front. So in the bank loan example, you're going to have to commit probably 20% of the upfront costs. plus pay for the ongoing costs. You must repay the full amount. So even if the project falls over, that you have to repay it back. There's no left or right about that. And it is on balance sheet. So it can be, so if a customer is concerned about borrowing more, or they don't want to borrow for solar because they've got some other investment that they need to borrow for in the future, that can be a deal breaker for using that type of financing instrument. The next one up is lease financing. So this one can have little to no upfront costs. So in many cases, a lease financer will be prepared to fund the entire cost of the project. The O&M costs can be wrapped into the leasing costs. So it can be just one payment. It can be structured so that the cash flows are positive, but not always. It's relatively easy to apply for a lease versus a bank loan. It can be off balance sheet, but not always. We'll need a customer to check with their accountant whether it's off balance sheet or not. But it is typically more expensive, and it's more expensive because the leaser is taking more of the risk. They're funding the whole system. The customer also doesn't own the asset. There can be expensive early termination costs, and in some cases there may be balloon payments at the end. So whilst the customer may pay for, say for 5 years lease costs, there may be a balloon payment at the end, and that's really common, for example, like in a vehicle lease, an equipment lease. The next one is sort of the PPA model. There's no upfront costs. It's completely off balance sheet because the customer's not paying for they're not paying like as a sort of a debt funding instrument. There's little to no performance risk for them because in a PPA, now the performance is actually risk is shifted to the funder. Can generally be cash flow positive, can be extremely long terms. You can have up to sort of 20-year PPAs, which can make them cash flow positive for the whole time. Costs are covered by the ESCO, so you're paying for the power off these systems, but the costs are being paid for by the ESCO. But can be a more expensive option. Right? This tends to be where you might be able to get debt funding for 8%. PPA company might be expecting more like 10 to 12%. The other thing is the customer doesn't own the asset, and there may be variable costs as well. So you might have some like a ratchet for the PPA price. They might start at say 16 cents, but increase at say 3% per annum. So we can use this financing to really boost the returns of a project. So if a customer comes at you and says, "Oh, you know what, 16% doesn't really float my boat," you can show them, well, what happens when we debt fund a portion of this project. So if we add debt funding for 10 years and 80% of the project is covered off by that debt funding, we can actually increase the rate of return to nearly 29%, which I'm pretty sure will float the boat of the customer. And that's we're probably going to get a payback within 4 years rather than like 6 years when you structure it like this. And I'm going to swap to Orkestra now to have a quick sort of like show you how you can use the business model builder to actually present these different models. So if we go and have a look at, I might just go to a solar only example here because I want to show the PPA. So if we go and apply the business model to this solar only example, I've actually got 3 different versions of financing already considered here. So we've got our PPA, we've got our lease, and our debt financing. So here, if we the way that I've set this up is I've got PPA. This is a common structure for PPA. I've just used the PPA. So within this business model builder, you can choose one of the different templates. There's a solar PPA template that I've used here. The only change that I've made is I've shifted the LGCs to the customer for the period of the project. If you want to know more about like how to set these up, I really strongly recommend you go back and watch some of the webinars from the business model builder series, which we'll add a link to in the email that we send you out. Georgie and I went through a whole range of different business models during that series. So in this project, I've set this up. I want to find different contract lengths, different PPA rates. And what I want to do is I want to generate at least $10,000 of free cash flow to customer while maximizing the PPA returns. Or we might shift this around and we were like, say, bugger the PPA co. I just want to generate the maximum cash flow for my customer as possible. And I know that we're probably going to be looking at like a 10% rate of return for the PPA co. So like, what is now the best PPA structure that we need to work towards to actually get a cash flow outcome for a customer? You're not going to be paying any money up front. This is all about generating cash flow. So here's an example. We've gone for a 15-year PPA at 12 cents. We've targeted a 10% return, and we're actually going to generate out of this project $40,000 of free cash flow a month. The customer doesn't have to pay a cent, and they're already going to be cash positive with this project. So then if we move up to the next one, which is like another really common type of metric, type of funding, which is the lease financing. In the structure of this one, we're gonna, you might say that the lease financing is aiming for like a 10% return. What we're doing here is just flexing the lease amount over a fixed term of 10 years to generate an outcome for the customer. In this case, we've fixed in the costs of here. So there's no escalator on these lease payments. These are just a fixed cost per month for this system. It's a shorter payback period, but we're still able to generate $19,000 per annum for the customer. And then at the end of the project, they're going to go from 19,000 to 152,000. So that's a pretty tidy little outcome for that customer. The final one is the debt funding. And the debt funding here, what we're going to do is we're going to actually need to change the range of this, I think. Yes, I do. I'm going to change this down to like $5,000. Sorry, I was just doing this before with a battery in it. So let's just, I'm going to goal seek this one. In this case, we're going to have loan repayments. Those again are going to be fixed. And so what we're doing is looking for the fixed loan repayment over loan return. And what we want to do is maximize the outcome, the cash flow outcome for a customer with at least an 8% return. In this case, I'm goal finding the outcome for a customer. And we're going from a customer having a, what was my rate of return here? So we're going from a 17% rate of return to a 37% rate of return using where 80% of the cost of the project are paid for by the project. And I think this was something like a 6-year payback, and now we've pulled the payback period to 4 years. So this can be a really powerful way of showing the customer, hey, now we've got funding involved. We can actually achieve your really aggressive payback periods that you're trying to achieve through using this financing.
That's crazy, going up to 37.45%. I know we did this a couple of months ago in, I think it was the last
second last.
Business models.
It was the last one that you and I did together, but it was the second last one.
Yeah, the business models webinar, and just the way that adding in that debt financing is wild, like how it changes the IRR and everything.
Yeah. So when you want to present the different results to a customer, so go back to that, that need to now present the different results from the business model builder, you can find the different options, and you can very, very quickly like swap from here's the cash purchase option to here's the customer's outcomes with the debt financing. When you swap to the financial tab, it'll actually show you the cash flow and give you the detailed cash flow breakdown and put the cash flow, like give you the commercial terms of the project. So that when you present this to a customer, they've got like, okay, how does this work? So that's how you can use our tool to be able to change up the conversation with a customer. So if you're getting stuck on my project's not getting particular ROI, you've now got a couple of different levers you can pull. One, go for a smaller project. Two, move it to a conversation about financing and work with the customer to understand, okay, well, here's your different financing options, which one might work for you. And then once you settle on that, then you go and like nail down the final result for a customer and find the financing you need, et cetera. But in that process, we're building trust with the customer the whole way along. We're starting with their problem, we're finding solutions for it, and then we're working to find a solution that's actually going to generate some outcomes for us.
Awesome.
So as the homework for this week, encourage you to we'll set up, we'll make sure that everyone has access to Business Model Builder. Encourage you to go and take one of the example projects that we did and go and actually apply the different models that we've got here to your projects. And and then ideally, if you've got a real world project, use the Business Model Builder to go and have a conversation with the customer about, hey, these are your different options. Does this move the dial for you? And particularly go back to a customer that told you the ROI payback's not good enough and try this approach with them, because that may be the thing that becomes the difference between having a sale and not having a sale. Final word is to the project risk. So 4 out of the 28 people that voted in this said that they project risk can be a deal breaker. Just build more fat into your project. So if someone says, oh, look, I'm really worried that we haven't got covered enough for O&M, or I don't trust the future forecast for FCAS and wholesale, put in some really aggressive escalators into your outlooks, and show, here's the base case, and here's a case of where things have gone to shit, and look, we're still making a reasonable return here. So you can use Orkestra to kind of test out different potential scenarios to actually find a solution that even considering a project sort of running into trouble, we're still going to make returns. Next week is the final session of this webinar series. Chris and I will be talking about pumping up the value of projects. So we're going to go through a few different sort of recipes of these are some ways that you can really turbocharge the value of projects by pulling all the different levers that are available to you, and showing some examples of how you can get some really outstanding results for a customer. So again, if the ROI and payback period aren't good enough, let's consider a broader range of potential options, because considering a broader range of options may actually be able to get the kind of outcomes that you need for a customer. So we'll go through those recipes next week together. And that's it. We're a little bit sort of over time, but
we don't have too many questions at this stage, but probably leads in really good to question we've had from 2 different people, Michael and Dave. When we're looking at the metrics, you've got payback, ROI, and we're pushing into NPV IRR. That's when these questions popped up, and it was, what about LCOE, levelized cost of energy? Would you consider LCOE evaluation is a good way to express NPV and true energy costs?
Yes, but only for solar projects. So LCOE is a really good metric when you're wanting to boil it back to what is the kind of what's a levelized cost of energy out of a solar system. So that's what it basically does, is it takes all the energy that or the value of all the energy that's generated, divides that by the total generation that comes out of that system, and then you get a price, in a sense, dollars per megawatt hour or cents per kilowatt hour that you can present to a customer. And so if we go back to our example that we had here, back to the project, you'll find LCOE is a little bit buried in this
the far right column of the table.
Far right column over here. You'll find a LCOE column over here. It is for the PV. And yeah, we can get some like, okay, well, out of this system, I don't know, let's find our 600 kilowatt system over here has a 9 cents per kilowatt hour rate out of it. Now, look, when you're speaking to a customer, if they're on anything more complicated than a standard, anytime rate, it might be quite challenging for them to wrestle with what that LCOE means. And yeah, you could potentially bring back like the cost of their bill to an average rate, but it can be a bit deceptive in terms of like you could take the total cost of the bill and divide it by this number here to give you like a blended rate for that. But in a commercial industrial world, it's not really how energy is priced, and it can be a little bit deceiving for a customer. And you could have a situation where, customer could either might have a really, really high demand rate or really, really low demand rate, and that skew the way that you look at LCOE when, and so, yeah, sure, you could bring those numbers back to each other, but like, it's not really, in my view, a particularly helpful metric when you're talking about C&I projects. Good for residential, because you can very, very easily for residential or even SME, where they've got a simple tariff that they're on, bring it back and you provide a nice little comparison for them. But I think for C&I, perhaps not the best metric.
Thank you. And then this is our last question. When we had three come through. Another one from Dave, and I think we briefly covered it, but it'll be good to recap. Dave had asked, if you don't know what the discount rate is, but if you don't know what the discount rate is 5% realistic? As I found 7 to 9% more common, but it would be good to get your opinion.
Yeah, 5% is not particularly realistic. I think maybe it was realistic like 2 to 3 years ago when we set the default in our software. I think you probably want to be going for something that's like as I said, like the commercial unsecured lending rate, I think is probably a good starting place if a customer doesn't know, or you haven't elicited that information from a customer in the first round of conversations with them. So yeah, I would probably go for that 7 to 9%, because that is going to be closer to the mark for the unsecured lending rate.
Thanks. We've had 2 more questions come in, which is awesome. First one from Jeremy. Current common objection is the risk of VFFCAS, so the new very fast FCAS forecasting. How can we reduce the worry for clients on these revenues?
Show them a result that doesn't include the FCAS. So you want to show them a really big downside case. Do a model run which shows here's the kind of happy path of like, here's we've taken a forecast and we've modeled it out and look at the nice returns, and then show them one where it's like there's only wholesale market arbitrage and demand reduction, and what kinds of returns are that? Because that's kind of like that's a more realistic worst case outcome for a customer, and maybe you might be able to find something that's somewhere in the middle by using the forecast tool, like forecast functionality in the tool. But yeah, just show them the downside, and if the downside is really bad, then you might have some work to do. But if the downside's still okay, then yeah, it can be the thing that can give the customers a confidence that